The hidden dark history of America's most powerful mansion, Biltmore, Christmas Eve, 1895. A woman screams in the East Wing. Staff rush through hidden corridors, their footsteps swallowed by stone walls 3 feet thick. By morning, the scream is forgotten, erased from official record, never mentioned in any guest book or society column. But the servants remember. They always remember. Beyond the beauty, beyond the 250 rooms and the palatial gardens, Biltmore holds secrets that tourists never see. Deaths recorded as accidents, tunnels that lead nowhere, rooms that were sealed and never opened again, financial ruin disguised as prosperity, a family curse whispered about but never proven, and beneath it all a question that haunts every corridor. What price did they really pay to build this empire of stone? They call it America's largest home. They should call it America's most expensive secret. The facade is perfect. Limestone glowing in mountain light. Gardens that stretch beyond sight. A library holding treasures kings would envy, but perfection is always a lie. Behind every grand vision stands a hidden cost. Behind every fortune stands a darker truth. Behind Biltmore's golden doors lies a history deliberately buried, systematically erased, carefully reconstructed for public consumption. This is not the story they tell on tour. This is not the romance of Gilded Age splendor. This is the story of what actually happened, the accidents they covered up, the workers who vanished, the financial desperation that nearly destroyed everything, the family secrets that shaped every decision, the darkness that money cannot illuminate. Who really built Biltmore, and what did it cost them? Not in dollars, but in blood, sanity, and soul. The answer is more disturbing than you imagine. And it begins not with George Vanderbilt's vision, but with the land itself and what was buried there long before construction ever began. If you want to understand America's Gilded Age, the true cost of wealth and the secrets that great families hide, stay with me. This investigation goes deeper than any documentary, deeper than any official history. We will walk corridors tourists never see, open ledgers that were sealed, and ask questions that still make the Biltmore Estate uncomfortable. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what other American mansions hide dark secrets worth investigating. Your support allows these deep investigations to continue. Now, let's begin where every dark story begins, with the land itself. Winter 1888. George Washington Vanderbilt II stands on a plateau above the French Broad River. Snow falls silently. The Blue Ridge Mountains rise in every direction. Bare trees claw at gray sky. This land is cheap. Too cheap. George's guide, a local named Thomas Wolfe, older and unrelated to the famous writer, shifts uncomfortably. "Mr. Vanderbilt, I should tell you something about this ground." George barely listens. He is 26 years old, the youngest son of America's wealthiest family, and he has found what he seeks: isolation, beauty, space to build something that will outlast his brother's garish Newport palaces, space to think, to read, to escape the suffocating expectations of New York society. "The Cherokee," Wolfe continues, "they wouldn't settle here, said the ground was angry, spirits they claimed, white settlers came anyway, most left within a few years." George smiles politely. He does not believe in spirits. He believes in architecture, in scientific forestry, in the power of human will to impose order on wilderness. His grandfather, the Commodore, built a transportation empire from nothing. George will build something more enduring. Not railroads that rust, but a legacy of stone and beauty that will stand for centuries. He does not ask why the land is abandoned. He does not investigate the broken foundations scattered across the hillsides, the remnants of homesteads where families tried and failed to thrive. He does not wonder why local farmers avoid this particular plateau, why they call it the Barren, even though the soil tests reasonably fertile. He simply begins to buy, and buy, and buy. By 1889, George has acquired nearly 125,000 acres. Not all at once, parcel by parcel, farm by farm, foreclosed properties, tax sales. Land so cheap that even cautious investors would call it a bargain. George's lawyers handle negotiations. Money changes hands quietly. Titles transfer. Within 2 years, George Vanderbilt controls an area larger than many European principalities. What he does not control is the history buried beneath. The Cherokee called the region Land of the Blue Smoke for the perpetual mist that hangs over the mountains. But they also called parts of it Atsilla, the fireplace, and told stories of battles so bloody the ground would not grow food for a generation. White settlers found arrowheads by the thousands, not ceremonial but battle points, stone designed to kill. Archaeological evidence now suggests that the Biltmore Plateau was a contested zone between rival groups, a killing ground. Skirmishes, ambushes, and raids across centuries left the soil rich with human remains. No single massacre, but a slow accumulation of violence that soaked into the earth. Then came European disease. Smallpox swept the region in waves. The Cherokee population collapsed. Survivors abandoned whole territories. The land around Biltmore was among the first to empty. By the time white settlers arrived in force in the 1780s, much of the plateau had been unoccupied for decades. Settlers tried. The records are fragmentary, but certain patterns emerge. Families would clear land, plant crops, build cabins. Within a year or two, they would leave. Sometimes illness was blamed. Fevers, wasting sickness, children who failed to thrive, livestock that died without clear cause. Other times, the records simply note relocated or moved west. One journal entry survives from 1823, written by a farmer named Josiah McConnell. "The land is good, but we cannot stay. My wife hears voices in the night. The children wake screaming. Our eldest boy, Samuel, speaks of figures in the tree line. The doctor finds nothing wrong, but we are leaving. This place wants us gone." By 1850, most of the plateau stood empty. Logging companies worked the periphery but avoided the central ridge. Too remote, they said, too difficult to access. But workers told different stories. Accidents in those woods, broken ropes, falling branches that should not have fallen. Men who walked off the job and never returned to collect their pay. When George Vanderbilt began purchasing land, few mourned its loss. Locals were happy to sell, take the Vanderbilt money and buy elsewhere, somewhere easier, somewhere quieter, somewhere that did not feel like it was watching. George noticed none of this, or if he did, he dismissed it as superstition. He had vision and capital. He would succeed where others failed because he was a Vanderbilt. Because he had the finest architects, the best engineers, unlimited resources. Because he believed wealth could overcome anything. He was wrong. New York City, 1889. Richard Morris Hunt's office overlooks Fifth Avenue. Hunt is 62 years old, America's foremost architect, trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He has designed mansions for the Astors and Rockefellers. He understands wealth and ego. He knows how to translate ambition into limestone and oak. George Vanderbilt spreads maps across Hunt's desk. "I want something that will last 1,000 years. Hunt studies the land surveys. The plateau is dramatic. The surrounding mountains are stunning, but something in the topography troubles him. "This is remote, George, very remote. Building at this scale in such isolation will be difficult and expensive. Cost is not a concern." Hunt has heard this before. It is always a lie. Cost becomes a concern. Eventually, always. "There is another matter," Hunt says carefully. "I have colleagues who have worked in North Carolina. They mention labor difficulties, disappearances, accidents at an unusual rate." George waves this away. "Appalachian superstition. We will bring skilled labor from elsewhere. Italians for stonework, Germans for carpentry. We will create a workforce that exceeds regional standards." Hunt nods slowly. He pulls out his sketchbook and begins to draw, not the chateau yet, just structural notes. Load calculations, material estimates. His pencil moves steadily, but his mind drifts to a conversation from years ago. A fellow architect, now retired, once told him about a project in the Appalachians. A resort hotel planned for a mountain valley, beautiful site, wealthy backers. Construction began in spring. By autumn, the site was abandoned, not for lack of funds. The workers refused to continue. Equipment failures, injuries, an unsettling sense that the land resisted. "They had to burn what they built," the old architect said. Local people said the ground was rejecting it. Hunt never believed the story. He still does not believe it, but he remembers it. George, Hunt says, if we do this, we must do it perfectly. No shortcuts, no compromises. If this house is to stand against whatever challenges that land presents, it must be built so well that nothing can threaten it. George smiles. That is exactly what I want. Hunt begins to design. Not just a house, a fortress, walls of limestone 3 feet thick in places, foundations sunk deep into bedrock, a structure so massive, so perfectly engineered that neither time nor nature nor anything else could bring it down. He does not know that he is building a prison as much as a palace, that the very perfection of his design will trap the Vanderbilt family inside financial obligations they cannot escape, that the thickness of the walls will muffle sounds that should be heard, that the labyrinth of corridors and service staircases will create spaces where things can happen unseen. Hunt draws through the winter, elevation after elevation, floor plans that evolve and expand. What begins as a large house becomes something else. A village under one roof, 35 bedrooms, 43 bathrooms, 65 fireplaces, a banquet hall with a ceiling 70 feet high, a library to hold 10,000 books, an indoor pool, a bowling alley. Servants' quarters for more than 100 staff. Hunt's assistant, a young draftsman named Richard Howland, asks the obvious question. Sir, how will they afford to operate this? The heating costs alone? They are Vanderbilts, Hunt says. They can afford anything. Howland wants to point out that the Vanderbilt fortune, while vast, is not infinite. That operating a structure of this size will require not just wealth but endless cash flow. That the house will be a financial black hole, consuming resources forever. He says nothing. Hunt is the master. Hunt knows best. The plans are completed by spring of 1889. Hunt travels to Asheville to present them to George. They stand on the plateau, drawings weighted down with stones against the mountain wind. George studies the elevations, the floor plans, the cross-sections showing every system, every space, every detail. It is perfect, George says. Hunt feels a chill that has nothing to do with the wind. He looks at the tree line. Something about the forest seems wrong. The proportions, perhaps, trees too tall, too dense, shadows too deep for the angle of the sun. When do we begin? George asks. Site preparation can start immediately, Hunt says. But George, I must be clear, a project of this scale in this location will face challenges we cannot predict. I have built many houses, none in circumstances like these. You worry too much, Richard. Hunt wants to say more, wants to refuse the commission, walk away. But the design is already in his mind. The most ambitious residential structure in America, his masterpiece, the project that will define his career and secure his legacy. Ambition is a trap. Hunt knows this. He walks into it anyway. They break ground in June of 1890. Within 3 months, the first worker dies. The death is officially recorded as an accident. James Henley, age 32, Irish immigrant, stonemason. Crushed beneath a limestone block that slipped from a crane. The crane operator, questioned extensively, swears the rigging was sound, the block secure, then it simply fell. Like something cut the rope, he says, but the rope wasn't cut, it just parted right through the middle. An investigation is conducted. Foreman Barak McName examines the crane, the rigging, the block itself. Everything appears sound. The conclusion is operator error or material failure. Henley's widow receives a small settlement. The incident is recorded in the site log. Construction continues. 1 month later, a carpenter named Otto Gerhardt falls from scaffolding. 30-foot drop onto stone, kills him instantly. Witnesses say he lost his balance, but Gerhardt was an experienced worker, careful and steady. He had worked at height for 15 years without incident. He was fine 1 moment, another carpenter reports. Then he jerked, like something grabbed him, and he fell. No evidence of foul play. No evidence of equipment failure, recorded as accidental death. Gerhardt's family in Pennsylvania is notified. Another settlement is paid. Construction continues. By December of 1890, 5 men have died on site, all ruled accidental, all within the first 6 months of construction. Workers begin to talk, not loudly, not in official reports. but in the bunkhouses at night over meals in the moments when supervisors are not listening, they speak of bad luck. The ground fighting back, of sounds that do not belong, whispers in empty rooms, shadows that move wrong, tools that disappear and reappear in impossible places. George Vanderbilt hears none of this. He is in New York or traveling in Europe, managing his investments and acquiring furnishings for the house that is slowly rising from the plateau. He receives monthly reports from the site, progress on schedule, budget mostly controlled, occasional accidents within normal range for a project of this scale. Richard Morris Hunt visits the site quarterly. He notices the tension among workers. He sees the turnover rate. Men quit without explanation. Entire crews request reassignment. Replacements are hired constantly. Is there a problem with site management? Hunt asks McName. No, sir, work is proceeding well. Then why do men keep leaving? McName hesitates. He is a practical man, not given to superstition, but he has been on the site for a year now. He has seen things he cannot explain. They are uncomfortable, sir. The isolation, the terrain. Some say the woods feel wrong. Wrong how? I could not say, sir. But McName knows. He has walked the perimeter at dusk, felt eyes on him from the tree line, heard movement that stopped when he turned to look, found tracks human-sized that appeared overnight in places no one should be. He has entered the rising structure at dawn and found doors open that were locked the night before. Found tools arranged in patterns no worker would create. Found once a pile of stones in the center of what would become the banquet hall, stacked into a cairn-like structure, precise and deliberate. No one claimed to have built it. The stones were cleared. The incident was not reported. Hunt returns to New York troubled. He writes to George, suggesting that site conditions be reviewed. George responds with enthusiasm. The house is taking shape beautifully. The foundations are solid. The limestone work exceeds expectations. Hunt's design is being realized perfectly. Hunt does not press further. The project is his masterpiece. Concerns about worker morale or Appalachian superstition seem trivial compared to the magnificence of what is rising from the plateau. By the end of 1891, the death toll has reached 8. All accidents, all officially explained. Frederick Law Olmsted arrives in spring of 1891 to begin landscape work. He is 70 years old, America's greatest landscape architect, designer of Central Park and dozens of landmark projects. He has worked on every terrain in every condition. Nothing surprises him. Biltmore surprises him. His first survey of the land leaves him deeply unsettled, not because of the damage from logging and farming. He expected that. He knows how to heal abused land. What unsettles him is the feel of the place. Olmsted is not a superstitious man. He is a scientist, a designer who works with soil composition and hydrology and ecological systems. But walking the Biltmore acreage, he feels something he has never felt on any other project. Resistance, not physical resistance, something else, a quality in the silence, a weight in the air. He stands in a cleared valley, sun bright overhead, and feels as though he is being watched by something that does not want him there. He mentions none of this in his reports. He focuses on the work. Reforestation, erosion control, the approach road that will wind through recovering forest, the gardens that will surround the house. Scientific, practical work. But at night, alone in his Asheville hotel room, he writes in his private journal, "This land resists. I have never encountered soil so reluctant to cooperate. Plantings fail without cause. Native species refuse to thrive. It is as though the ground rejects our intention." Olmsted dies in 1903 before Biltmore is fully realized. His journal is archived. The entry about resistant ground is ignored for decades. By the time the house is structurally complete in 1895, the official death toll stands at 13. Accidents and illness, stone dust in the lungs, a fall, a crushing injury, fever. One man simply disappeared, walked into the woods during a break and never returned. His body was never found. Unofficially, the number is higher. Workers who quit and died shortly after in Asheville or elsewhere from causes that seemed unrelated but followed too close to their time at Biltmore. Illness that came on suddenly. accidents that felt too coincidental. No investigation was ever conducted. No pattern was officially noted. The Vanderbilt lawyers settled claims quickly and quietly. Families were paid, silence was purchased, and through it all the house rose, limestone and oak, copper and marble, towers reaching for the sky. Windows that caught mountain light. A structure so beautiful, so perfect, that no one wanted to ask what it cost in blood. Christmas of 1895 arrives. The house is ready. Guests arrive by train, then carriage. They step into the entrance hall and gasp. 3 stories of stone and carved wood and stained glass, fireplaces roaring, electric lights glowing. A palace transported from Europe to the American mountains. The guests never learn that 13 men died building their wonderland. Never learn that workers whispered about the land being cursed. Never learn that the house, for all its beauty, was raised on ground that did not want it. George Vanderbilt stands in his library, surrounded by 10,000 books, and feels triumph. He has done what his brothers could not. He has created something permanent, something meaningful. He does not yet know the price that permanence will demand. Not just in dollars, though that will be crushing, but in sanity, in health, in the slow unraveling of everything he hoped to build. The house is finished. The darkness is just beginning. Behind the beauty lies machinery, not metaphorical, literal. The house is a machine, and machines devour fuel. 3 massive coal-fired boilers in the sub-basement, each the size of a small room, burn through tons of coal every week. Winter demands more. The heating system circulates hot water through miles of pipe to radiators in every room. When the system is running at full capacity, the roar of the boilers can be heard through the stone walls. Someone must feed the boilers, day and night. Shifts of men in the sub-basement, shoveling coal, monitoring pressure, checking valves. The heat is hellish. Coal dust turns everything black. Lung disease will claim several of these men within a decade. The electric system requires constant attention. Generator in a separate building, wiring throughout the house. Fuses blow. Circuits fail. In 1895, electrical systems are new. Standardization does not exist. The house has a custom system that only a handful of engineers understand. If the generator fails, the house goes dark. If wiring shorts, fire risk is immediate. Staff electricians work daily, testing, repairing, replacing. The danger is real. Electrocution, burns. One electrician, Marcus Flynn, loses 2 fingers when a panel arcs unexpectedly in 1897. Plumbing is equally complex. 43 bathrooms, hot and cold running water, indoor toilets still rare in the South. Pipes freeze in winter despite the heating system. Leaks develop. Pressure failures occur. Staff plumbers are on call constantly. The house employs over 100 staff. Each has a role. Maids clean obsessively because dust is relentless and the house is enormous. Footmen serve meals, stoke fires, answer call buttons in every major room. Cooks feed family, guests, and staff. Laundresses wash mountains of linens and clothing. Housekeepers manage supply inventories. Butlers oversee service. Below stairs in the service corridors and staff quarters, life is rigid and exhausting. Days begin before dawn and end after the family retires. Wages are modest. Housing is provided but cramped. Staff eat separately in a dining room designed for efficiency, not comfort. Control is absolute. Staff are forbidden to use the main staircases. They move through hidden corridors, narrow and painted institutional green. They are expected to be invisible, to appear when needed, vanish when not. To have no personality, no needs, no existence beyond their function. Punishments for violations are swift. Dismissal without reference. Loss of housing. In an era without labor protections or social safety nets, dismissal could mean destitution. Some staff stay for years. Loyalty is rewarded with marginally better treatment. Trusted servants receive slightly higher wages, private rooms, more autonomy, but they are never free. They live in the house, subject to its demands every hour. Turnover is constant, particularly among the lower staff. Maids and footmen quit frequently. Some cite exhaustion, others offer no explanation. They simply pack their few belongings and leave. Exit interviews are not conducted. No one asks why. The assumption is that Appalachian workers are unreliable. Replacements are hired from Asheville or surrounding counties. The churn continues. What is not recorded, what never appears in the household ledgers or employment records, is the pattern of distress among staff who work in certain areas of the house. The East Wing, third floor, is avoided when possible. Maids assigned to those rooms request transfers. Several quit rather than continue. When asked why, they cite unease, sounds that should not be there, doors that will not stay closed, shadows. Footmen tasked with night rounds report similar experiences. The house after midnight is too quiet, not peaceful, oppressive. Some report hearing footsteps behind them in empty corridors, turning to find no one. Others describe a sensation of being watched, of something just out of sight keeping pace with them. One maid, Elizabeth Corwin, reports to the housekeeper in 1896 that she saw a figure in the third-floor East Wing hallway at dawn. A woman in white, standing motionless. When Corwin approached, the figure vanished. "I am not staying in this house," Corwin tells the housekeeper. "There is something wrong here." She is dismissed immediately. Her testimony is recorded in a private household log, then forgotten. Other incidents accumulate, objects moved during the night, a vase on a mantel found on the floor unbroken, books shelved in incorrect order, fires in rooms that should be cold. George Vanderbilt is informed of none of this. Edith, his wife, hears rumors but dismisses them. Staff are prone to superstition. Old houses settle. Sounds are misinterpreted. But below stairs, among the workers who actually inhabit the house, belief is widespread. The house is not right. Something resides here beyond the family and staff. Something that was here before the foundation was laid. Something that resents the intrusion. The official story, the one told to guests and recorded in society columns, is one of triumph. George Vanderbilt has created a masterpiece, a center of culture and beauty in the mountains, a retreat where art and nature are celebrated. The hidden story, the one told in staff quarters and whispered in Asheville taverns, is darker. The house demands too much. Men died building it. Staff are worked to exhaustion maintaining it. And somewhere in its 250 rooms, something watches. By 1900, George is spending over $250,000 per year to operate Biltmore. Roughly $7 million in today's money, every year, forever. His investment income covers this barely. The Vanderbilt fortune is vast but not infinite. George's share is significant, but operating Biltmore consumes nearly all of it. He saves little. He cannot afford major setbacks, and setbacks are coming, forces beyond his control. Taxation, recession, illness, death. The house is finished. The trap has been set. The Vanderbilt family is about to discover that beauty is the most expensive burden any family can bear. George Vanderbilt believes in science. He believes that reason and expertise can solve any problem. When he looks at the damaged land surrounding Biltmore, he sees opportunity. Heal the forests. Prove that scientific management can restore abused wilderness. Create a model for the nation. He hires Gifford Pinchot in 1892. Pinchot is young, 27, just returned from studying forestry in Europe. America has no forestry profession. Logging, yes. Exploitation and ruin, yes. But management for long-term yield? That is a European concept. Pinchot walks the Biltmore forests and sees both devastation and potential. Decades of careless logging have left slash and erosion. Hillsides are bare, creeks run choked with sediment. But the land can recover. With care, with science, the forests can be brought back. He begins methodically. Inventory the existing stands, identify healthy trees, mark areas for selective cutting, plan reforestation, train local workers in proper techniques. The work goes well at first. Crews plant thousands of seedlings. Erosion control measures are installed. Fire breaks are cut. Pinchot keeps meticulous records. This is not just forestry. This is research, proof that American wilderness can be managed sustainably. But certain areas resist. The plateau immediately surrounding the house responds well to intervention. Plantings take hold. Native species begin to recover. Within a few years, the approach road is lined with healthy young forest. Beyond that cultivated ring, deeper in the back country, the response is different. Seedlings die without apparent cause. Soil tests show adequate nutrients. Water is sufficient, yet the trees fail to thrive. Workers report unease in those areas, not specific threats. Just a sense that the land does not want them there. Crews assigned to remote tracts ask for reassignment. Some quit. Pinchot, a practical man, dismisses this as Appalachian superstition. The soil has issues he has not yet diagnosed. The solution is more science, more testing, more persistence. In 1895, Pinchot leaves Biltmore for a government position. He will eventually become the first chief of the United States Forest Service. Biltmore was his proving ground. The work done here will shape national policy. George replaces Pinchot with Karl Schenk, a German forester with rigorous training and field experience. Schenk continues the program. He expands it. In 1898, he founds the Biltmore Forest School, the first forestry school in America. Students come from across the country. They live on the estate, learning by doing, marking timber, calculating volumes, conducting controlled burns. The school operates for 15 years, training hundreds of foresters who will spread scientific forest management nationwide. This is George's greatest legacy. Not the house, which will always be a curiosity, but the forest program. The proof that wilderness can be restored. That exploitation is not inevitable, but even Schenk notices anomalies. Certain tracts never fully recover. Reforestation efforts fail repeatedly. Trees grow stunted or die young. Wildlife avoids specific valleys. Hunters report that game is scarce in areas that should be rich habitat. Schenk documents this in his teaching. Difficult soils, microclimates, possible contamination from old mining activity, scientific explanations for observed failures. He does not document the other observations, the ones that do not fit scientific models. Students assigned to overnight field work in remote areas return unsettled. They report hearing sounds, movement in the trees. Voices, though no one else is present. Some report seeing figures at a distance, shapes that do not quite resolve into recognizable forms. One student, Harold Peterson, writes home in 1901, "The forests here are unlike any I have studied. They are beautiful, but they do not feel welcoming. I have spent nights alone in wilderness from Maine to Michigan. I have never felt afraid. Here I am afraid." Peterson completes his training but never returns to Biltmore. In his later career as a forest manager in Oregon, he will tell colleagues that the North Carolina mountains are haunted. Not figuratively, literally. No official investigation is conducted. The forest school continues successfully until 1913. Schenk returns to Germany. The program ends, its work accomplished. The forest itself remains. Over 8,000 acres after Edith sells the majority to the federal government in 1916. The remaining acreage is managed, thinned, harvested selectively. It becomes a revenue source, modest but steady. And through the decades, certain patterns persist. Foresters avoid specific tracts. Hiking trails skirt particular valleys. Maintenance crews work in pairs, never alone. The official explanation is practical, safety in remote terrain. The unofficial reality is simpler. No one wants to be alone in certain parts of the Biltmore forest, not because of wildlife or terrain. Because the forest feels occupied, because you are never truly alone there. Modern tourists hiking Biltmore trails sometimes report unease, a sense of being watched, sounds that do not match known wildlife, disorientation in areas where trails are clearly marked. Park rangers, when pressed, acknowledge that certain areas have higher incident rates. Lost hikers, unexplained injuries, equipment failures, but they attribute this to terrain and user error. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps the forest is simply forest, old, deep, indifferent to human presence. Or perhaps George Vanderbilt's great experiment, his effort to impose order on wilderness, was never as successful as the records suggest. Perhaps the land accepted management only on its own terms. Perhaps the forest tolerates human presence but does not welcome it. The trees remember what was buried beneath them. The soil remembers the blood it absorbed. And forests, old forests, have long memories. March 6, 1914. Washington, District of Columbia. George Washington Vanderbilt II dies on an operating table. Complications from appendicitis. Emergency surgery. He is 51 years old. The telegram reaches Biltmore the same day. Edith Vanderbilt reads it in the library, surrounded by her husband's books. For a long moment, she does not move. Then she sends for the estate manager. "We need a full accounting," she says. "Everything. Income, expenses, debts, obligations. I need to know exactly where we stand." The accounting takes weeks. The numbers are worse than Edith feared. Operating costs, $250,000 annually. Farm and forest revenue, $75,000 annually. Deficit, $175,000 annually. That deficit, year after year, has been covered by George's investment income. Income that is now frozen in probate, subject to estate taxes and reduced by the federal income tax implemented in 1913. Edith studies the ledgers. She is 43 years old, a widow with a 14-year-old daughter. She has no formal business training. Society expects her to rely on male advisors, to be guided by lawyers and accountants. She ignores society's expectations. She has managed Biltmore's household operations for 16 years. She understands the systems. She knows what the house demands, and she knows the truth. Without drastic action, Biltmore will consume everything within a decade. The estate will be lost, the staff will be dismissed. The house will be sold, probably broken up, the land developed, the structure left to decay. George's dream will end. Everything he built will vanish. Edith will not allow that. Not because of sentiment, though she loved George. Not because of pride, though the Vanderbilt name means something. But because hundreds of families depend on Biltmore for their livelihood. Because the forestry program George began has national significance. Because abandoning the estate would betray everything George stood for. She begins making decisions. First, sell the excess land. The 87,000 acres George assembled is beautiful but unaffordable. The federal government, seeking land for national forests, is a willing buyer. Negotiations begin. The sale takes 2 years to finalize. Approximately 86,700 acres transfer to federal control for about $5 per acre, far below what George invested. The proceeds are significant but not overwhelming. They retire debts and create a financial cushion. They do not solve the underlying problem. Second, reduce operating costs. Edith begins cutting staff, not all at once. Gradually, through attrition and targeted layoffs. She consolidates departments. She simplifies operations. She closes unused wings of the house to save heating costs. The cuts are painful. People lose jobs in a region where jobs are scarce. Edith provides severance when possible, letters of recommendation, help finding other employment. But the math is unforgiving. The staff must shrink. By 1918, household staff has been reduced from over 100 to roughly 60, still substantial but sustainable. Third, eliminate waste. Edith reviews every expense. She renegotiates supplier contracts. She cuts her own spending drastically. Guest lists shrink. Entertaining becomes rare. She and Cornelia live quietly, almost austerely, within the vast house. The strategy works. By 1920, the estate is operating at break-even. Barely. There is no margin for error. One major repair, one bad year for the farm, one downturn in timber prices, and the deficit returns. Edith manages with grim determination. She reviews accounts monthly. She questions every expenditure. She makes hard choices without hesitation. Biltmore survives because Edith refuses to let it fail. But survival is not thriving. The house feels different. Rooms stand empty. Staff corridors echo. The vast structure built for life and activity now feels abandoned, and the phenomena below stairs intensify. With fewer staff, the house is less supervised. Whole wings sit dark and unmonitored. Sounds carry farther in the silence. The remaining staff report more frequent incidents. Objects moved, doors opening on their own. Footsteps in empty hallways, cold spots in rooms that should be warm, shadows that move independently of light sources. One night in 1921, a footman named Daniel Murray is conducting evening rounds. He enters the third-floor east wing to check that windows are secured. The hallway is dark, lit only by his electric torch. He sees a woman at the far end, white dress, long dark hair, standing motionless. "Ma'am," he calls, "Mrs. Vanderbilt." The figure does not respond. Murray walks toward her. As he approaches, the figure fades, not walking away, fading, becoming translucent, and then gone. Murray reports the incident. Edith listens without comment. Then she reassigns him to other duties. The third-floor east wing is locked. Staff are instructed to stay out unless absolutely necessary. No explanation is provided. The wing simply becomes off-limits. By 1925, Biltmore has achieved a kind of equilibrium. Lean, austere, sustainable, the house functions. The estate employs fewer people, but those jobs are secure. Cornelia is grown, married, beginning a family. Edith has saved George's dream at tremendous cost, to herself, to the staff, to the vision of Biltmore as a vibrant center of culture. The house survives, but it survives as a shadow of what George intended. And then comes October 1929. The stock market crashes. The Great Depression begins, and everything Edith has fought to preserve comes under existential threat once again. The Depression hits Asheville like a hammer. Banks fail, businesses close, unemployment surges past 20%. Tourism, which had been growing through the 1920s as automobile travel became popular, vanishes overnight. Hotels stand empty, restaurants shutter. The region's economy collapses. Biltmore's investments lose value. Dividends thin, then stop. The careful balance Edith maintained through the 1920s disintegrates. By 1930, the estate is bleeding money again. Edith faces a choice: sell everything and walk away, or gamble on a radical idea. The idea comes from multiple sources: advisors, local business leaders, even staff. The house is magnificent. People would pay to see it. Open Biltmore to tourists. Charge admission. Turn the private palace into a public attraction. For Edith's generation and social class, the idea is scandalous. Privacy is sacred. The thought of strangers wandering through your home, examining your possessions, feels like violation. But Edith is pragmatic. She has already sold most of George's land. She has already cut staff and closed wings. Opening the doors to paying visitors is simply the next necessary adaptation. There is more. Asheville desperately needs economic activity. If Biltmore can draw tourists, those visitors will support hotels, restaurants, shops. The estate can become an economic engine for the region. Edith decides. Biltmore will open to the public in March 1930. Preparations are substantial. Rooms must be arranged for viewing, barriers installed to protect furnishings, routes mapped, staff trained, tickets printed, marketing conducted. The opening is scheduled. Admission is set at $1. High enough to generate revenue, low enough to be accessible during a depression. No one knows if anyone will come. Opening day exceeds expectations. Visitors come from Asheville, from surrounding counties, from as far as Tennessee and Virginia. They pay their $1 and step into the entrance hall. The reaction is immediate. Awe, silence, then whispers. People look up at stone rising 3 stories, at carved oak and stained glass, at scale and craftsmanship beyond anything they have seen. They move through the banquet hall, stand beneath the 70-foot ceiling, gaze at the triple fireplace, wander the library with its thousands of books, linger in the winter garden under the glass roof. For people in the midst of economic collapse, Biltmore offers something unexpected, not escape exactly, but proof that beauty exists, that human effort can create something magnificent, that not everything is lost. The first day brings in modest revenue. More important, it proves the concept. People will come. The model works. Edith expands operations carefully. More tour days, better marketing, seasonal promotions. Revenue grows, not enough to restore Biltmore to its former operating capacity, but enough to keep the house open, the staff paid, the essential systems maintained. The 1930s pass slowly. Tourism ebbs and flows with the economy. In the worst years, attendance drops. Edith cuts where she can. In slightly better years, attendance rises. The estate survives month by month, season by season. But opening the house has consequences beyond finance. With hundreds of strangers moving through Biltmore every week, incidents multiply. Visitors report strange experiences, cold spots in particular rooms, sounds that do not belong, shadows, feelings of unease or being watched. Most say nothing. A few ask staff, "Is the house haunted?" The official answer is always no. Old houses make strange sounds. The mind plays tricks. There is nothing supernatural about Biltmore. Unofficially, staff know better. They have seen too much, experienced too much. They develop strategies, stay in pairs, avoid certain areas after dark, do not linger in the third-floor east wing. Move quickly through the basement corridors. Some visitors capture something on camera. In the age before digital photography, anomalies on film can be dismissed as light leaks or development errors. But certain images are harder to explain. A 1934 photograph taken in the banquet hall shows a figure in the background, white dress, long dark hair. She appears in none of the other frames. No one recalls seeing her during the tour. The photograph is shown to Edith. She studies it in silence. Then she files it away. No comment is made. The image is never publicly released. By 1940, Biltmore is an established tourist attraction. Revenue covers operating costs in good years, falls short in bad years. The estate survives but does not thrive. Edith manages with relentless discipline. Then comes December 1941, Pearl Harbor. The United States enters World War II, tourism halts. Gasoline rationing makes civilian travel nearly impossible. Edith faces another financial cliff, and then an unexpected offer arrives. The National Gallery of Art in Washington needs a secure location to store its most valuable paintings. Biltmore is remote, secure, climate-controlled. The gallery offers to rent space for the duration of the war. Edith agrees. Crates arrive in darkness. Armed guards take up residence. Portions of the house become a vault for America's artistic heritage. The arrangement brings revenue. More importantly, it brings prestige. Biltmore is not just a mansion. It is a national asset, trusted to protect cultural treasures during existential crisis. The war ends in 1945. The art is retrieved. The house is restored to its tourism function. And Edith, now in her 70s, begins to plan for the long future. She will not live forever. Cornelia is unsuited to management. The estate will pass to Cornelia's sons, George and William Cecil. They must be prepared. Biltmore's survival will depend on their decisions. Edith dies in 1958. She saved George's dream. She transformed a private palace into a sustainable enterprise. She proved that adaptation, however painful, is the price of endurance. But the darkness she could never quite eliminate remains. In the locked wings, in the silent corridors, in the forest that watches, in the land beneath the foundation. Biltmore survives, but survival is not the same as peace. William Cecil takes control of Biltmore in the 1960s. He is practical, business-minded, unsentimental. He understands that the estate must operate as a professional enterprise, not a family home that occasionally admits visitors, a business. He expands tourism aggressively, more tour routes, better facilities, seasonal events, marketing campaigns. He adds a winery in 1985, opens restaurants on the grounds, creates lodging options, diversifies revenue streams. It works. By the 1990s, Biltmore attracts over 1 million visitors annually. The estate employs over 2,000 people. It becomes one of North Carolina's top tourist destinations. Financial stability is achieved. The house is maintained meticulously. Preservation is continuous. Copper roofing is replaced. Limestone is conserved. Interiors are restored. Modern systems are installed discreetly. Biltmore thrives. The family's gamble succeeds. The house that nearly bankrupted the Vanderbilts becomes a self-sustaining enterprise, but the incidents never stop. With over 1 million visitors per year, experiences multiply. In the age of digital photography and social media, documentation increases. Visitors capture anomalies, orbs, shadows. Figures most are easily explained. Dust, Light reflections, lens artifacts, but some defy easy explanation. A 2003 photograph taken in the library shows a man in Victorian-era clothing standing near the window, dark suit, full beard. He appears in one frame, not in the frames before or after. No actor was present during the tour. No reenactor was scheduled that day. The image circulates online. Skeptics point out that period clothing can be faked. True. But the man's face, when enhanced, shows detail that would be difficult to fabricate. And his posture, his positioning, suggests he was unaware of the camera. Not posing, simply present. The photograph is one of hundreds. Some show figures, others show light anomalies, strange mists, shadows that fall wrong. None prove anything definitively, but cumulatively they create a body of evidence that is difficult to dismiss entirely. Tour guides are asked constantly, "Is Biltmore haunted?" The official answer remains no. But guides have their own experiences, doors that open without cause, cold spots that have no source, sounds in empty rooms. One guide, Sarah Hastings, worked at Biltmore for 15 years. She led tour 5 days a week. She knew every room, every detail, every story. She was rational, skeptical, dismissive of ghost stories, until one evening in 2008. She was closing down after the last tour. Walking through the banquet hall, ensuring lights were off and doors were secured. She was alone, or thought she was. She heard footsteps behind her, distinct, deliberate. She turned. No one was there. She called out, no answer. She resumed walking. The footsteps resumed, matching her pace, staying behind her. She reached the exit and looked back. The banquet hall was empty, vast, silent. But she felt watched, certain that something stood in the shadows, observing. She filed a report. Management noted it. No action was taken. Hastings completed her shift, but she never again stayed in the house alone after closing. Paranormal investigation teams have requested access to Biltmore. The estate has always refused. Management does not want the house associated with hauntings. Tourism is built on history, architecture, and beauty, not ghost stories, but employees know, housekeeping staff know, security knows, maintenance crews know. The house is occupied by more than the living. Certain areas remain problematic. The third-floor east wing still rarely accessed. The sub-basement boiler rooms where workers report voices in the empty hours. The servants' corridors where shadows move wrong. And the forest, always the forest. Hikers on estate trails still report unease, disorientation, sounds, the sense of being followed. Rangers find lost hikers more frequently in certain areas. Equipment failures occur disproportionately in specific tracts. A 2015 incident involved a maintenance crew working deep in the back country. 3 men, experienced woodsmen, working to clear a trail after a storm. They heard voices, conversation, clear, close. They followed the sound, assuming other hikers needed help. The voices stayed ahead of them, moving, leading them deeper. After 20 minutes, they realized they were lost. The trail was gone. The voices had led them into unmarked forest. They used GPS to navigate back. Later, reviewing their route, they realized the voices had led them in a circle, deliberately away from the trail, into terrain where someone unprepared could easily become seriously lost. The crew reported the incident. A search was conducted. No other hikers were found in that area. No explanation was determined. The forest simply does what it has always done, resists, disorients, watches. By 2020, Biltmore is a modern enterprise, professional management, diversified income. Financial stability. The house is safe, the legacy secure, but the darkness remains, not everywhere, not always, but in corners, in silence, in moments when you are alone and the house reminds you that you are not. Tourists leave enchanted. They remember the beauty, the history, the grandeur. They do not realize what lies beneath, what watches from the forest, what walks the halls when the lights go out. And perhaps that is mercy, to see only the surface, to admire the facade, to never know what was buried to build it, what died to maintain it, what lingers unseen in the shadows. Biltmore stands, a triumph of vision, a masterpiece of architecture, a monument to Gilded Age ambition, and a reminder that some costs cannot be measured in money. Some prices are paid in blood, insanity, and the slow erosion of peace. The house is beautiful, the house is powerful, The house endures, but it is not and has never been entirely theirs. What is Biltmore? The question seems simple. A house, a historic mansion, America's largest private residence. The answer tourists receive is architectural and historical. Limestone and oak, Gilded Age excess, Vanderbilt wealth. But for those who have worked there, who have spent nights alone in the corridors, who have felt the weight of the house when it thinks no one is watching, the question is more complex. Is Biltmore just a building? Or is it something more, something aware, something that remembers? Something that claims those who enter and never entirely lets them go. The official record is clear. 13 deaths during construction, all accidental, normal for a project of that scale and era. Safety standards were primitive. Accidents were inevitable, but the unofficial count is higher. Workers who left the site and died shortly after. Illness, accidents, causes that seemed unrelated but clustered too closely. Staff who vanished, walked away from jobs and were never seen again. How many? 20, 30. The records are incomplete. Many workers were migrants, Italians, Irish, Germans, men without families in America. If they disappeared, who would notice? Who would investigate? Then there are the visitors. Over the decades, a small number of tourists have experienced medical emergencies on site. Heart attacks, strokes, sudden collapses. Most survive. A few do not. Are these random, statistically expected in a population of millions of visitors over a century? Or is there a pattern? No study has been conducted, no data has been compiled. But anecdotally, certain staff members believe that Biltmore has a higher incident rate than comparable sites. Why? No one knows, or no one will say. The phenomena have never been systematically investigated. Management has no incentive to authorize study. The estate's brand is built on history and beauty, not mystery and unease. But the questions remain. What is in the third floor east wing? Why was it sealed? What did the staff see that made Edith Vanderbilt close it permanently? No official answer exists. The wing is described as storage or unused space. Visitors never access it. Few employees ever enter, but the wing is not empty. Maintenance crews have been inside. They report nothing unusual, just rooms, furniture under dust covers, windows overlooking the mountains. Yet the unease persists. The sense that something is wrong, not visible, not tangible, but present. What about the forest? Why do certain areas remain avoided? Modern forestry teams have surveyed every acre. Soil composition is documented. Ecology is understood. There is no scientific reason for unease. Yet foresters and rangers, people who spend their lives in wilderness, who fear neither wildlife nor terrain, avoid specific tracts. Not because policy requires it, because instinct demands it. Why? What is in those valleys that makes experienced professionals uncomfortable? Again, no answer. Only patterns of behavior, trails that skirt certain areas. Work assignments that always go to crews, never individuals. An unspoken agreement not to be alone in particular places. The Vanderbilt family does not discuss any of this. Publicly, Biltmore is a success story, a historic house preserved, a family legacy protected, a cultural treasure shared with millions. Privately, what do they know? What have they experienced? What has been passed down through generations as family knowledge, never recorded, never spoken aloud? George died young, 51, appendicitis, surgery, infection. The official cause of death is clear, but was there more? Was he already failing before the appendicitis? Had the stress of maintaining Biltmore, the endless financial pressure, the impossible burden of the house already weakened him? Edith lived to 85. She saved Biltmore. But at what cost? She spent 44 years managing the estate. Decades of relentless pressure, hard decisions, sacrifices. Did those years take something from her? Did the house take something? The next generation, Cornelia and her sons, distanced themselves from direct management. They professionalized operations, hired executives, separated family from business. Was that wisdom or retreat? The Cecil family still owns Biltmore, still oversees operations, but they do not live in the house. They do not walk the corridors at night. They do not sleep in the rooms where George slept, where Edith struggled, where staff reported figures in white dresses. They govern from a distance. Perhaps that is wise. Perhaps the only way to control Biltmore is to refuse to be consumed by it. The house stands, the tourists come, the revenue flows, the operation succeeds, everything looks stable, everything looks safe. But late at night, when the tour ends and the lights go down and the house settles into silence, something else wakes. Not always. Not predictably, but often enough that those who work late know to stay together, to avoid certain hallways, to move quickly through the shadows. And in the forest, in the deep back country where the trails end and the wilderness begins, something still watches. Something that was there before George Vanderbilt ever saw the land. Something that never left. The tourists do not know. They see beauty. They admire craftsmanship. They take photographs and buy souvenirs and leave enchanted. They do not see the workers who avoid the third floor, the guides who will not stay late alone, the maintenance crews who will not enter certain basement rooms without backup. They do not feel the weight of the house when it decides to make itself known, the cold that has no source, the doors that open against their locks, the footsteps that echo in empty halls. They do not know about the 13 who died building it, or the others who died after, or the staff who left and never came back, or the visitors who collapsed without warning. They do not know about the land, the battles fought there, the blood absorbed into soil, the Cherokee who would not settle it, the white farmers who tried and fled. They see only the surface. The story the estate once told, and perhaps that is mercy, to see beauty without knowing its cost, to admire the dream without understanding the nightmare beneath. Biltmore stands, magnificent, enduring, powerful. And beneath the limestone and oak, beneath the gardens and forests, something else endures, something older, something that will be there long after the tourists stop coming, long after the Vanderbilt name is forgotten, long after the house itself crumbles back into the earth. The land remembers, the forest remembers, and memory in these mountains has weight. The hidden dark history of America's most powerful mansion. You have walked through the corridors they do not show on tour. You have seen the ledgers they do not publish. You have heard the stories the estate does not tell. 13 men died building Biltmore. That is the official count. How many more died in the aftermath, broken by the work, consumed by the machine of the house, lost in the forests that never wanted human presence? George Vanderbilt dreamed of beauty. He built perfection, and perfection devoured him, not the house but the burden of maintaining it, the endless costs, the impossible mathematics of grandeur. Edith saved what George built, but the price she paid is written in the decades of struggle, the ruthless cuts, the painful choices. She gave her life to the house, and the house took everything. The tourists see wonder. Behind the wonder lies sacrifice. Behind the beauty lies darkness. Behind the triumph lies loss. This is the story they do not tell, the real cost of the American dream, the price of immortality in stone, the blood in the foundation, the ghosts in the halls, the land that never forgave the intruder. Biltmore stands. But what stands with it? What walks its corridors? What watches from the forest? What waits in the sealed rooms? You know now, you have seen behind the facade. You understand the true history, the hidden history, the dark history. If you found this investigation valuable, if you want to support deep research into the secrets America's great families hide, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement makes these detailed investigations possible. Tell me in the comments, what other American mansions hide dark histories? The breakers in Newport, where servants died in fires no one talks about. Hearst Castle in California, built on land taken from Mexican families. The Rockefeller Estate in Sleepy Hollow, where workers were buried in unmarked graves. These stories matter, not to sensationalize, but to remember, to honor those who paid the real price for Gilded Age splendor. To remind ourselves that behind every grand vision, behind every monument to wealth, stand ordinary people who gave their labor, their health, their lives. And sometimes they never left. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking truth beneath beauty. Thank you for remembering those the official histories erase. The investigation continues. I will see you in the next deep dive into America's hidden darkness.